Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. When we discuss reggae, we always talk about the artists and their music, and we easily overlook the producers who sit on top of the recording process and make sure that the artist's vision emerges as a beautiful finished product. Reggae music has seen some magnificent producers over the years, like the larger-than-life Coxsone Dodd, Lee Scratch Perry, Joe Higgs, Sonia Pottinger, and Nini the Observer in the 60s and 1970s, down to the likes of Donovan Germain and Bobby Digital in the 80s and early 90s. But when we talk about the digital era of reggae music, which took off in the mid to late 1980s, one of the most important names is that of the great Fatis Burrell, the producer and music executive that introduced the likes of Sizzla and Luciano to the world, and was the main driving force and mastermind of the movement that would come to be known as the Rasta Renaissance. By the end of the 1980s, dancehall had by far displaced roots reggae as the dominant sound of Jamaica. This brand of dancehall was totally different from the variants which had grown side by side with roots reggae in the 1970s up into the early 80s. That style of dancehall was powered by rhythms or instrumentals by real musicians and instrumentalists. But by the middle of the 80s, electronic instrumentals that didn't sound at all like the traditional reggae rhythms were lighting up the airwaves and parties in Jamaica. This new wave also brought in the phenomenon of slackness, the term which was used to describe themes of sex and violence, which was a deviation from the well-known roots reggae tenets of spirituality and social consciousness. Fattis, incidentally, was a part of the dancehall wave, and since beginning to work as a producer in the mid-1980s, he had produced hits for Yellowman, Charlie Chaplin, Sanchez, and other dancehall kings. But by the end of the 80s, his growing Rastafarian beliefs had him start withdrawing from raga productions and begin to formulate a plan to bring back the glory days of roots reggae into the digital era. This master plan would involve him mentoring a whole new generation of conscious roots reggae musicians that would form the tip of the spear that we now know as the Rasta Renaissance. Let's dive into the story of Fatis Burrell, the producer that put roots reggae back on the map. Fattis was born on July 23, 1954 in Whitfield Town in Kingston, Jamaica, but moved with his family to England at the age of 5, where the Burrell clan lived for a few years before going back to Jamaica when young Philip was in his teens. Jamaica at the time was a very rough place to be, with the gang violence and political wars which were ravaging the beautiful island. Fattis, as a youth, became involved with a street gang that was super violent and was affiliated with the ruling PNP political party. He was tall and built like a tank and was known to be very tough, and he was eventually picked to be one of Prime Minister Michael Manley's bodyguards. This role meant that he was able to amass a lot of clout in those days. But with the end of Manley's tenure in 1980, Fattis was set to return full-time to the dangerous life as a gangster in the streets when his life and destiny took a sharp turn. He was encouraged by reggae producer George Fang to try his hands in the music business. He respected Fang, who had also been a hard man in the streets, and gave it a thought. But when Sly Dunbar and Robbie Shakespeare, who were also his friends, called him to do the same thing, his mind was made up and he decided that his future lay in the music industry. He entered music like a duck to water and quickly made impact as a producer with his first production, which was a song called Dogs to the Bone, which he put together for Sugar Minot in 1984. This song was recorded at the famous Channel 1 studios owned by the Hookin brothers. He also recorded EPs for dancehall stars like Wayne Wade and Tenor Saw. He went on to establish his own record company, which he called the Vina label in 1985. This label was the vehicle that Fattis intended to use to promote rising dancehall stars and vocalists like Sanchez, Daddy Freddy, and Thriller U, who all made their debut on that platform. For all his tough guy credentials, he was a devout Rastafarian who not only read the Bible daily, but also adhered strictly to an ital diet of mostly fish and vegetables. And with the passage of time, his Rasta consciousness grew stronger and began to put him off slackness more and more. By 1989, his spiritual transition inspired him to begin a new label called Exterminator Records. The term Exterminator was a code word for what he was about to do to Babylon. He designed this new label as an outfit that would harness not only new talent, but redefine the sound of veterans, as he had begun to produce remarkable material for the likes of Beres Hammond, Coco T, Frankie Paul, and Josie Wales. He also began to work with a young fiery Rasta vocalist called Capleton, who was not interested in signing for any label as he felt it would lead him to slackness. He only agreed to sign for Exterminator after he found out that Fattis was also a Rasta and had a spiritual goal in mind for the label, a goal of taking over the airwaves as well as the dance floors for Jah. After watching the 1992 Denzel Washington movie Malcolm X, Fattis changed the label's name by taking out the X in Exterminator and employed Jamaica's most celebrated saxophonist Indian Fraser to be the label's musical director. This decision to bring in Fraser brought in a depth and quality of production that set the label apart from almost all others in Jamaica at the time. Up until Exterminator showed up, most producers cared little for the quality of the music being pushed out and were content to churn out as much material as possible for quick money. Fattis, however, had a different idea. In addition to Dean Fraser, he also brought in Sly Dunbar and Robbie Shakespeare, as well as Cat Core, the lead guitarists of reggae band Third World. Exterminator was suddenly the hottest label on the island, began to attract the likes of Garnett Silk, who cut a number of singles under Fattis' guidance. In the same year, Jefter McClymont, aka Luciano, had heard about the revolution going on at the label, and after auditioning, he was quickly signed up and released his debut album titled Moving On Up in 1993. And in 1994, Exterminator's profile would skyrocket into international prominence with the breakout success of Ini Kamozi's Here Comes the Hot Stepper, which Fattis had produced. In the same year, Fattis would discover a new superstar in the making in an 18-year-old vocalist called Miguel Orlando Collins, aka Sizzla Kalonji, and produced his first album, Burning Up, in 1995. In a recent interview, Sizzla spoke about how Fattis threw out all of his gangster-sounding tracks and retained only the ones that had spiritual essence. And by that time, the Where There Is Life album by Luciano was dominating the airwaves and had the island enthralled by spiritually based anthems like It's Me Again Jah and Lord Give Me Strength. The next album by Luciano, titled Messenger, became an even bigger success. And in 1997, Sizzla's album Praise Ye Jah became a breakout hit that launched him into superstardom. Exterminator now had two of the hottest artists in the country, as well as upcoming fiery Rastafarian musicians, and not to mention the high-profile veterans in its ranks. It was the engine room of a new spiritual consciousness in music and inspired other labels and artists to follow that route. Fattis continued to produce and promote Roots Reggae into the 2000s for a new generation of artists coming up. This fresh lineup included the likes of Lutan Fire, Kezidek, Jesse Royal, and Turbulence, to name a few. Fattis was a perfectionist, and his preference for intricate production meant that his production costs were much higher than what was normally obtainable. So by the end of the 2000s, he slowed down on producing and focused on building a new state-of-the-art studio with plans to do more spectacular things with Roots Reggae. Sadly, his next phase of plans never materialized as he suffered a stroke and passed away on December 3rd, 2011 at the age of 57. That was the end of Philip Fatis Burrell's earthly walk, but his impact transformed the Jamaican music industry like no one else had done in decades. He made Roots Reggae cool again and acceptable by a new generation of reggae fans. The Exterminator family became for a time an oasis of sorts, where artists with the conscious spirits came together under a leader that they could trust with their careers. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.